time to get out of the bubble and step into the friction if you really, really want to start learning. Find out what I'm talking about coming up next. What are we really learning if we're only listening to people who share our perspective? Honestly, I would say not that much. But what we are doing when we stay within our comfortable echo chamber, our bubble of people who share our perspective, what we are doing is reinforcing our already entrenched view of the world. Now, when we kind of step out of that bubble, that protective, comfortable, warm bubble where everyone says things that we agree with, when we step out of that bubble and step into the friction, when we step into some dissonance and some discomfort of engaging with people who do not see the world the way we see it, we, for the first time, get an opportunity to really meaningfully expand our perspective in growth-inducing ways. Honest intellectual engagement with alternative perspectives does not mean you have to get to the end of that engagement and agree with the person or their perspective. But beyond expanding your perspective, seeing the world from other people's point of view, there are some other benefits that come from kind of stepping into the friction and engaging with people who don't see the world the way you do. One of the really important things, particularly for those times when you get into an engagement with someone, a dialogue, an intellectual exchange with someone over ideas that you don't agree with, is you get to test your arguments. When you argue, when you dialogue with someone you don't agree with, you have an opportunity to test and then strengthen your arguments. You don't get to do that when you're just talking with people who agree with you, because they're always going to agree with your argument. Or if they disagree, it's going to be pretty soft disagreement. You're not going to get a chance to have your arguments, your view of the world tested with someone who sees the world differently than you. And I personally have had this happen to me too many times, where I thought I had a rock solid view on a particular issue, and I could articulate to myself my arguments in favor of my position really well. But when I got into a dialogue with someone who had thought about it from an alternative perspective, who had thought about it in different ways, I realized the depth of my arguments was pretty minimal. That overall, I could not really effectively argue my position in the face of alternate perspectives, alternate data. So when we step out of our comfort zone and engage in good intellectual dialogue with someone who doesn't agree with us or someone that we don't agree with, we get to test our arguments and really think about it from an alternative perspective to strengthen it from that perspective in ways that we don't when we're just talking to people who agree with us. The second thing that comes along with this is really third, right? Expanding our perspectives, strengthening our arguments. And the third thing I think is really critical just for civility and for society and for our culture is it helps us foster more empathy. Again, when we engage in intellectual dialogue, when we're attempting to learn from someone that we disagree with, we have to try to look at the world from their perspective, to try to understand the world from their perspective. Again, you don't have to agree with it, but if you want to have an honest engagement with someone, an honest dialogue with someone, part of what you're doing is understanding the world from their perspective, attempting to. And when you do that, then all of a sudden, that person is much more human to you, much more accessible, much more understandable. Again, don't have to agree, but you can come to a point where you can say, I don't agree with you, but after talking with you, after really listening, I do understand how you came to the perspective that you hold today. And so we can learn to have respect for someone. We can learn how to have empathy for their position. And we can learn that I can have a healthy, productive relationship with a person that I don't necessarily agree with. And I think we're at a place in modern society where we're in desperate need of more of that. More empathy, more understanding, more compassion, and a greater awareness that we don't have to agree with each other, to treat each other with civility and respect and dignity. So, how do we learn from those we agree with? First off, we have to start seeking out people with different perspectives, people that we know or that we at least believe hold a perspective that is quite different from ours. So seek those people out. And then when you have an opportunity to engage with them, listen. Really listen actively. And we've talked about this in a number of videos. But what active listening means is being fully present, listening with intention and attention to what the other person is sharing with you, and pushing down that natural urge to work on formulating what you want to get across to that person while they're trying to talk to you. So it's just listening. And then as you actively listen, have some good questions. Go deeper. Well, that's interesting. Why do you believe that? How did you come to that particular belief, that particular stance on this issue? So active listening and good active questioning. And number 3, I think, is maybe the hard part. And number 3 is learning to manage the heat that can build up inside of us, the friction that comes from moving into a dialogue with someone that we disagree with. The key to that is remembering that their perspective of the world is not personal to you. It is not about you. It's about them and their perspective on the world. Just like you and your perspective on the world is about you. Now, when colliding perspectives or differing perspectives meet, there is friction a lot of times. But we just have to realize that that feeling of heat that we're experiencing is our own ego in the moment. And we just have to take a breath and say, this is not about me. I'm here to learn from this person. So I'm gonna push down my urge to respond from an emotional place. I'm going to kind of buffer my ego, and I'm just gonna be here. I'm gonna be present. I'm gonna be actively listening and engaged. And then at the end of the day, be okay not seeing eye to eye. Because you can come out of a dialogue, it's not about winning. It's not about winning or losing in an argument. It's about learning from each other, learning from someone that you disagree with. And it's okay to leave an argument, to leave an intellectual dialogue and not agree. That's okay, because I learned, you learned, we learned together. So get out of that bubble, step into the friction, and learn from everyone. If you found today's content helpful, please take a moment, hit that like button, share it with anyone and everyone that you think might find this conversation helpful. And if you haven't subscribed, my goodness, why not? Take a moment, hit that subscribe button before you go anywhere. And until next time, please be well.